All right, so we're going to get you ready for a lab that we're going to do in class. And this is typically called the candle burn time lab. And so what we're going to do is take a tea light, a little tea light, and we're going to put different size beakers over top of the tea light and find out how long that flame will burn for until it goes out. So the question that we're asking then is, how does the volume of a beaker affect the burn time of a candle? And what we're going to talk about here to get you ready for this lab is some of the background information. So the first thing that we should talk about are states. And we know that solid, liquid, and gas are three states that we talk about very frequently. When you see chemical equations, like you're going to see in a moment, solids have a little S beside them, liquids a little L, and gases have a G. And this may seem very, very straightforward, and indeed it is. However, when you see them in a chemical reaction, it's very, very helpful to know what those things are. So let's talk about the chemistry of burning. The scientific term for burning is combustion. We also call this sometimes oxidation. Keep in mind, this is different. This is not oxidization. Those are two different things, oxidation or combustion. Okay, and what this means is a chemical reaction with oxygen. So really anything that's burning is undergoing a chemical reaction with oxygen. So let's take a look at an example of something that we're going to burn. Of course, we know that whenever we burn anything, one of the things that we need is we need a fuel. And in our case, the case of this lab, we're going to use wax as our fuel. We could also use things like natural gas and gasoline, but in this lab, we're burning a candle, so the fuel is going to be wax. And of course, if we know combustion is a chemical reaction with oxygen, then we're having fuel plus oxygen. And this is, of course, a gas. So we put the state after the chemical. Oxygen makes up about 20% of the air. The other 80% of the air is made up of, some of you may know this, nitrogen. About 20 and 80. All right, so one type of combustion that we're going to see in a candle is incomplete combustion. And when we have incomplete combustion, we get four products. So these are the two chemicals, fuel and oxygen. These are the two things that are the reactants. They're reacting together, and we're going to get four products, four things that are made in the chemical reaction. The first is a gas that does not support combustion, so it doesn't allow things to burn, and it's used in fire extinguishers. And this is, of course, carbon dioxide. And this is a gas that burns, that does not support combustion, so it does not burn, but it's produced when things burn. All right, so the second thing is, of course, a gas that prevents red blood cells from carrying oxygen, which makes it very dangerous to humans. It's a suffocating gas. So many of us will have monitors in our homes to make sure that we don't get too much of this, and this would be, of course, carbon monoxide. And it too is a gas. All right. The third product is, of course, many of you would have seen this. When you see the product of something burning, when you see the result of something that's been burning, we would see this soot. Okay, so it's a black solid, and it simply is carbon in its solid form. And this is like charcoals that are left after you have a campfire or something like that. We get this black solid called soot, but really it's just carbon. And then the final product is a transparent colorless gas that condenses at 100 degrees Celsius, and this is nothing other than water. And of course it's in a gas form as well. okay? So here, right below this is a little bit of a diagram of what's going to happen. We're going to take this beaker that you see here, and we're going to place it over top of our tea light. What will happen then is that the wax will melt, which you've seen before, and then it not only does it melt, but it also vaporizes. So it gets so hot that it evaporates, and that's what burns. It's this wax gas that burns. It's not the wick. This, of course, will use up the oxygen, right? The oxygen that's in the beaker to start will be used up, and carbon dioxide, which we know does not support combustion, will be produced. And so what happens then is that the candle's going to burn for so long and will eventually be extinguished because there's no oxygen left and there's only carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, etc. So you can do your own hypothesis here. If the volume of a beaker is increased, then the candle burn time will, and you can take a guess. Do you think the candle burn time will increase? Do you think it will decrease? And you can use some logic to determine what you think this is going to be. I'm going to leave that for you to do as the student. And because now we're experts in variable types and definitions, we're going to take a look at this chart and we're going to make sure that we are up to speed. So we have 3 variable types, and we're going to talk exactly about what they are. So one of those variable types that we're going to look at is, of course, having to do with reading the beaker volume, and the beaker sizes that we have available to us are 100 mils and 250 mils. So this is, of course, what we're changing between trials. This is what's chosen by the experimenter, the independent variable, and this would be the volume of the beaker. Now, remember, we're striving for specificity. Do not say size of the beaker, okay? Because this is just not as accurate, right? We want to be specific. We want to be accurate. Volume of the beaker is what we're talking about. So this is the independent variable, and how are we going to measure this? Well, we're going to read this directly from the beaker. So you may use a 100 mil beaker, you may use a 250 mil beaker, and so on and so forth, but that's how we're going to describe it. All right, so that's what we're changing between trials. How does the volume of a beaker affect the burn time of a candle? So what we're going to measure is the dependent variable, and this is what's measured by the experimenter. And what is the dependent variable? The candle burn time. Okay. How are we going to measure it? We're going to use a stopwatch. So this is measured with a stopwatch. And the stopwatches will be available for you to use. The other types of variables which we know about that keep the experiment fair and that are kept the same throughout are, of course, called, you know this well, the controlled variables or the control variables. And so some examples of what these control variables look like are the same type of air, so about 20% oxygen is available to the candle to burn during each trial. We're going to start the timer consistently at the beginning of each trial, so we wouldn't want to put the beaker on top and then start timing for one trial and then start timing before we put the beaker on top. So we're going to make sure that things are all very consistent. And you're going to describe specific procedures used, including quantification, to describe some of these things. Okay, so I'm going to leave this for you to do and for you to think about here and here for how you consistently are going to control for these 2 variables. All right, you'll notice the observations and then the questions which are here and ready to go. Now, at this point, you're all set to do this lab next class.